Story 1. Last April, when my water broke at 33 weeks pregnant, labor never started. However, I delivered 2 days later via emergency cesarean section because the baby tried to come out feet first. I spent 1 week in the hospital, and the baby spent 2 weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit. Thankfully, we are both happy and healthy now. Story 2. Yesterday, I was heading back in about 30 minutes. I am a medical student currently rotating through inpatient internal medicine. Story 3. I was there 2 days ago for another weight check for my small toddler. It is just genetic, but they see that she is underweight and want to monitor her. For myself, the last time I went was for extreme non-stop vomiting. I was breastfeeding my now toddler, who was then 4 months old, and temporarily stopped producing milk because of it. Story 4. I think we should do periodic medical examinations, but we do not pay attention until we are in a serious condition. Regular medical examinations help us discover hidden dormant diseases. Story 5. About 3 months ago, I installed several decals and signs to direct people to the locations of the different wards. Story 6. September. Lung wall collapse due to metastatic cancer. Thought it was the end and started organizing my will, disposal of books, and what to do with my body. I was put on a new chemotherapy protocol and responded so well that I did not need oxygen after 3 days and was discharged. The oncologist actually used the word amazing to describe how quickly and effectively it worked. I am still on the same chemotherapy in June. It will be the 7th anniversary in July of my initial diagnosis with colon cancer. Story 7. I am in medical school, so the last time I went to the hospital was for work. The last time I was a patient was in 2019. I had appendicitis at 3 a.m. the night before I was scheduled to take my first medical college admission test. It was dramatic. My body was literally trying to destroy itself just so I would not have to sit for that exam. Story 8. A year ago, I had surgery to remove a cyst from my left ovary. It turned out to be a teratoma, which is basically an egg cell that started to develop abnormally before ovulation and created various types of tissue, including muscle, nerves, hair, nails, and teeth. I do not know if it had hair, and I prefer not to know. It was very frightening because only after the surgery did I learn that it was not cancer. Story 9. May 12th cardiac angiogram results. I need major open heart surgery. Just another thing on my list. Lucky I am old. Story 10. About 2 years ago, accident and emergency for a dog bite. Not serious, just needed antibiotics, but general practitioner surgery refused to treat. Story 11. Motorcycle accident, or more specifically, getting run over after the accident. My accident was not severe, so I could have easily walked away. Story 12. Wellness check. I was very drunk and emotional, and my roommate was concerned. I am still paying off the bill and somewhat resent him, even though his intentions were good. Story 13. Went to the emergency room twice in the span of a week in May. I went because I have a history of blood clots and, for some currently unsolved reason, I lost a lot of sensation in my feet while sitting too long at my personal computer. My feet swelled up very much. I had to go to the emergency room just in case. I did not have a clot either time, thankfully. Now I just have to get some answers. Story 14. 3 years ago, I stumbled in center field and took a softball to the face. I split my inside lip and had an avulsion of a front tooth. The doctor sewed up my lip and repositioned the tooth. I had minor dental work the next day. The tooth was already partially dead from previous chips and root canals over the years. It is fully dead now and feels foreign, but I am used to it. Story 15. To stay with my mother overnight. She slipped and hurt her back. They gave her strong medication to manage the pain. She was speaking incoherently. Story 16. 2 months ago, the day before I took my driver's license exam, I got hit in the head by a soccer ball while wearing my glasses. The glass part popped off and sliced my brow bone. Thankfully, the glass did not shatter, so I did not lose my eye. Story 17. Checkup on eyes and injection to the left eye. Not as sore as people would think. So many medications and staff talking to take your mind off it. Story 18. Testicular torsion is a condition where one of the testicles twists. One day, while I was walking home, I experienced severe pain and could not move. I had to wait until the ambulance arrived to pick me up. Fortunately, they were able to save my right testicle. Story 19. September 2024. Accident at my new workplace. The arm of the four-dimensional milling machine almost broke my knee. There was insufficient safety implemented, and after recovery, they fired me. Story 20. Early in January, I was checking on my father who broke his hip while I was trying to take him Christmas shopping a couple of weeks earlier. Story 21. An elderly driver looking the wrong way down the street plowed into me on my bike. I couldn't see through his tinted windows on a gray, rainy day and assumed he had seen me. I mashed my ankle and foot a bit while I went over the hood. Fortunately, I still have the hardware in that ankle from an accident 20 years ago, so nothing was broken this time. I was sitting on the pavement in a puddle, waiting for the ambulance, and wondering if the older man, who was hyperventilating, might need the emergency medical services more than I did. I was bruised enough that I lost the last good month of bike commute weather that year. Story 22. In October 2020, I fell onto my back against a wall and nearly became paralyzed. That wall still has that mark to this day. Story 23. Monday. Underwent a 3-hour surgery with no pulse and no blood pressure. Woke up after 10 hours intubated and catheterized. Took 20 people to bring me back. I have been in the hospital for 2 days. Story 24. My second appendectomy. No, I did not have a second appendix. They just did not remove it all the first time, so I had appendicitis twice and 2 appendectomies. I do not recommend it. Story 25. 3 weeks ago, the child had his second case of parainfluenza virus type 3, which can cause pneumonia or bronchiolitis. He was hospitalized for 5 days to manage the illness because his body is too young to fight it off independently at just 1 year old. Story 26. For myself, suicidal ideation occurred a few years ago. I went for a family member with heart problems a few days ago. Story 27. Almost a year ago, I had diverticulitis. I did not need surgery, luckily, but it was still quite unpleasant. Story 28. A year ago, I had chest pains and the doctor sent me to the emergency room. I spent a couple of hours there and had many tests done. Nothing was found. A year later, I still have the same chest pains, but nothing has ever been found as the cause. The pain is fairly mild, so it is more of a worry than a bother. It has been a long time without any other symptoms, so it does not seem to be anything serious. Story 29. Last year, I cut my knee while training. I didn't think much about it at the time, wiped away the blood, and carried on. Then I washed it thoroughly afterwards. About a week later, my knee started swelling and turning an angry red color. I went in and was seen by a doctor. It turned out to be a rather nasty staphylococcus infection. The doctor put me on a 1-week course of antibiotics, which, thankfully, cleared it up. Story 30. About a month ago, I had serious pain in my lower abdomen and a frequent urge to urinate, even when my bladder was almost empty. I thought I had pulled a groin muscle while doing yard work at my parents' house earlier that day, but it turned out to be a kidney stone. They gave me stronger pain medication that worked much better than the over-the-counter medicine I had taken earlier, and I felt much better, although I spent most of the night there. Story 31. 2 years ago, I had a ruptured appendix and had to have emergency surgery. I am from the generation of men who do not go to the doctor until it is clear that we are dying. I am an elder millennial and grew up in a farming community in New Zealand. Growing up, we did not go to the doctor unless bleeding would not stop even after being bandaged for multiple hours or if we were sick for over a week. It was not unusual to use veterinary products intended for animals on ourselves. It is really unwise, and even knowing that, I still do it. Luckily, I have people around me who want me to remain alive and who are willing to tell me when I am making poor decisions. Sometimes they tell me I am unwise for not going to the doctor. The day my appendix ruptured, it happened while I was riding my motorcycle to work. I had a meeting just after I arrived, and I was in quite a lot of pain. It was not until the teacher I was meeting with told me to go straight to the hospital that I actually went there. It took about 3 hours from arriving at the hospital to being in the operating room. They told me I needed surgery. I asked where to go to schedule it, but they said no, I needed surgery immediately. I asked where to wait, and they said they were waiting to finish cleaning an operating room. Once it was ready, I would have surgery. Story 32. I am currently at the hospital. The last time I was here was on Friday. I am a clinical research associate, so I visit hospitals as part of my job. Story 33. 3 years ago, I spent 3 days in the hospital for asthma that could not be controlled. I probably needed another day, but there was a COVID-19 surge, and they wanted me as far from the COVID-19 patients as possible. It took my lungs months to fully recover. Story 34. In 2022, I was diagnosed with acute pulmonary embolism. I spent almost 2 whole days on a gurney in a hallway because the hospital was overrun with coronavirus disease patients. Story 35. Last August, I was at a friend's lakeside barbecue when a sudden thunderstorm rolled in faster than the weather application could respond. One bolt struck the aluminum canoe rack about 10 feet from where I was flipping burgers. The current arced into the damp ground, up through my legs, and I woke up in the emergency room with a lattice of red Lichtenberg figures across my ribs and left arm. The doctors were excited. Only a handful of lightning branching burn cases a year occur in our city hospital. They kept showing medical students my torso as if I were a living textbook illustration. I spent 48 hours connected to every monitor they had while cardiology ran tests to ensure the electrical shock hadn't disrupted my heart rhythm. Fortunately, there was no permanent damage, just a vivid pattern resembling a tree made of blood vessels for about a month before it faded. I still can't smell barbecue without hearing thunder in the back of my head. Story 36. Kidney stones. They gave me fentanyl and morphine together, and it still hurt like crazy, but not as much. Then they told me it was a small one. I also got a kidney infection from them. That was a difficult Christmas. Story 37. Colonoscopy. The worst part was being wheeled into the room where they perform the procedure. The 2 nurses told me to lie on my side and bring my knees up. On the wall was a large LED monitor. The nurse pushed a device behind me, and my anus appeared on the screen. Story 38. My wife was giving birth to my daughter 4 years ago. The last time I was there solely for myself was when I was born. Story 39. A few weeks ago, I visited my father. However, I have never had to go for anything for myself. The closest was when my wife had to go to extract my sperm when our child was 9 months old. Story 40. My cornea tore open in the middle of the night. I woke up because my eye felt funny. I opened my eye and it ripped. I thought I had been stabbed in the face. Story 41. My husband accidentally overdosed on his attention deficit hyperactivity disorder medication because his dose is the maximum and he took it twice. He had to drink a charcoal smoothie, and all tests came out good. Story 42. On the 22nd of May this year, I was admitted to the hospital and discharged 12 days later, last Tuesday. I had decompensated heart failure caused by a clot in my pulmonary artery, which triggered atrial fibrillation and increased my heart rate to 180 to 200 beats per minute. It was likely this way for a couple of weeks, but I attributed the breathlessness and tiredness to a chest infection for which my general practitioner prescribed strong antibiotics. I was at work in an office when I experienced pain while breathing, and an ambulance was called for me. I was immediately given arrhythmia medications to lower my heart rate. It was also discovered that I was retaining a large amount of fluid, so I received diuretics and urinated heavily. On the day of my discharge, I was scheduled for a cardioversion to restore normal heart rhythm, but draining the fluid from around my lungs and elsewhere relieved the strain on my heart, allowing it to revert to a normal rhythm on its own. Therefore, I was discharged that evening. I now take a combination of medications to regulate my blood pressure, control my heart rate, thin my blood, and take magnesium supplements due to electrolyte loss. This experience scared me and my closest colleague greatly. Story 43. Last Friday, I went to Vancouver General Hospital Solid Organ Transplant Pharmacy to pick up my anti-rejection medications, 3 anti-rejection and 1 antiviral medication. The rest of my medications are regular prescription medicine, but those must come from the hospital. Story 44. 3 weeks ago, my face swelled up, as well as my throat and nose. I could barely breathe. I might have angioedema. I have not gotten around to getting tested yet. Story 45. Yesterday, I had an X-ray of my knee. The small-town doctors group is affiliated with the hospital for services they cannot provide in-house, such as tests like X-rays and magnetic resonance imaging. Story 46. 4 years ago, apparently, I got my menstrual period. Perimenopause caused me to bleed so much and so quickly that I thought I was hemorrhaging and going to die. No, it was just my period. Story 47. I was at a hospital last week. I accompanied my wife to an oncology appointment. The last time I was at a hospital was in 2019 at a hospital walk-in clinic. I was in a car accident the day before and I was getting checked to make sure I did not have any internal injuries. Story 48. 2 years ago, after taking an eye exam, the optician recommended I get checked for blood pressure. I went to the emergency room the next day with a reading of 235/141. I was seen by a doctor within minutes as a top priority. It is all under control now. Story 49. 2 years ago, I played hockey, and a shot got deflected, hitting me in the face. I shattered my cheekbone and cut my face pretty badly. Thankfully, it did not fracture my orbital bone or jaw, so I did not need surgery, just stitches for the cut. Story 50. 6 weeks ago, I experienced heartburn. My wife and mother became very worried. I drove to the emergency room and complained of chest pain. About 2 hours later, I was wheeled into the intensive care unit. I had a heart attack, received a stent, and underwent related treatments. It all happened so fast, and everyone remained calm. I did not fully realize what was happening until it was over. I was awake the entire time and received little to no pain medication. It was a strange sensation feeling the catheters inserted into my wrist and up the inside of my arm. Story 51. A few years ago, I broke a blood vessel in my thigh and had internal bleeding, which left a giant hematoma. Story 52. Yesterday afternoon, I went to the emergency room for my rectal cancer. I had a CT scan and some assistance with bowel movements, then went back home, and yes, it worked. Also, cancer is terrible. Story 53. I had a strange rash on my legs. I visited many doctors, but no one could determine the cause. They advised me to go to the hospital. The hospital also could not identify the problem, and the rash disappeared on its own after a few weeks. Story 54. Visiting my grandfather when he had a pacemaker implanted earlier this year. For me, a bad case of food poisoning a couple of years ago. I have no idea what could have caused it. Story 55. I was with my wife who had a very full bladder. Yes, that is a medical concern. In fact, we were fast-tracked. Within 10 minutes of arriving, we had seen a doctor, and a nurse was inserting a catheter. 1.8 liters of fluid immediately came out. She needs pelvic floor physiotherapy because her pelvic floor muscles are too strong. Story 56. A few months ago, I was constantly thirsty, felt extremely fatigued all the time, and finally started to have some chest pains. I found out that I am diabetic. My blood sugar when I arrived was 560. Anything over 150 is considered high. Apparently, I was very lucky not to have been in a coma. My blood sugar is well under control now. That was my first real time in the hospital, and I am not trying to go back anytime soon. I have been managing my blood sugar very well and only rarely exceed 150. Story 57. I found a lump. They insisted on seeing it the same day. Probably nothing, they said. Probably. I see these letters on the ceiling in my bedroom last thing every evening and first thing every morning. Story 58. In Korea, you receive a free health checkup every 2 years, where they test everything from urine and blood to x-rays and mental health assessments. I had to take my chance as an international student. Story 59. Colonoscopy in January. My doctor sent me the stool collection kit in the mail. I called her and asked what it was for. I told her there was no way I was using that kit and taking it to a lab. She said, okay, then you can have a colonoscopy in the hospital. I scheduled it the day before my birthday because I was off work. The preparation was exhausting. The procedure was short, and I was sedated with no pain or memory of it. I felt very unwell for 3 days after the procedure. I had never spent so much time in the bathroom before or since. I do not recommend this experience. Story 60. I went to psychiatry to get diagnosed for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I suspected that I had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but I wanted to be sure. He asked why I wanted to get diagnosed. I guess because it is a mental disorder and I wanted to get treated. He seemed uninterested and did not perform any tests. I left and probably will never go to a hospital for this kind of problem. Story 61. Earlier this year, I had a cold that turned into difficulty breathing, which became shortness of breath while lying down. I went to the hospital and was checked for pneumonia but was diagnosed with a severe case of respiratory syncytial virus. Story 62. I was thought to have appendicitis and was half an hour away from going into surgery. Thankfully, I had to use the bathroom right before the nurse was going to start an intravenous line. I had a large bowel movement, and all my abdominal discomfort vanished instantly. It was fortunate. I was young at the time, so I did not know what an intravenous line was, nor did I realize how close I was to surgery until years later. I am terrible with needles now, and it was twice as bad when I was younger, not to mention actual surgery. Story 63. Liver and kidney failure caused by consuming a full bottle of hydrocodone during a self-inflicted suicide attempt. Story 64. High blood pressure. Something I ate and possibly an allergy on the weekend. Long waiting times. Story 65. This past April, I went in for an angiogram and 6 bypasses. A week later, I was out and feeling better than I have in a long time. Story 66. For blood donation to my mother in January. Things are not good now. The hospital is not a place for everyone. Story 67. I fell off my mountain bike at the beginning of the year in a relatively new city and country for me. I sprained my ankle badly and had to hike out of the woods. I did not even know where the hospital was. Story 68. I went to see my junior colleague at midnight because he had an accident. He is safe and perfectly healthy now. Story 69. Triple hernia operation at the end of March this year. Was in the recovery ward in the hospital for 3 nights afterwards. Story 70. Stitches in my forehead. I tried catching a short and obese friend when she fell. I hit my head on the sidewalk. My friend was fine. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.